Why hello there, and welcome back to Tabletop Ferox. And in this episode, I will be discussing the concepts of success and failure, mostly failure, in tabletop role-playing games, specifically as it relates to skill checks, because they are a core part of the vast majority of games, but are often seen and used a bit too simplistically or too strictly enforced depending on the specific game. And looking at skill checks along with the meanings of success and failure with a bit more nuance is something that is important to do from both a game master and designer perspective. But before I get into this, we need to define some terms. So for the purposes of this discussion, a skill check is a situation where a character tries to do a thing, the results of which are uncertain. So some kind of mechanics are enacted to determine if the attempt is a success or a failure. Most games have some sort of additional rules beyond that, but this is a definition which should fit with almost every game that has some set of mechanics. So, just for example, let's say that a character wants to jump a 10-foot gap. That is the thing they want to do, the results of which are uncertain, so we call up some sort of mechanics. Let's just say we roll a d6 for strength and a d10 for athletics, then add them together and compare to a difficulty of 8, with a result equal to or exceeding the difficulty, meaning a success. And in this scenario, the definitions of success and failure are fairly simple. Success means clearing the gap, failure means falling in. But let's say that we want something a bit more complicated. So let's say that a character is trying to remember what a werewolf's weakness is. So obviously in this situation, success means remembering that werewolves are vulnerable to silver, and failure means not recalling that information. Or maybe recalling that information incorrectly, or perhaps information that was wrong to begin with. Or maybe just remembering where you need to look for the information, but still needing to go and find it. Basically, success is a positive outcome and failure is a negative outcome, not just a literal success or failure on the specific task. However, what is appropriately positive for a success or negative for a failure is going to be highly situational. So let's add some more details here and say that in whatever game we happen to be playing, werewolves are immune to all damage except silver, and none of the characters have any silver weapons, therefore making this information essential to the Fight the Werewolves mission. So let's look at the various failure outcomes that I mentioned earlier. So option 1, you just do not remember the information, and the issue there is that could very well lead to inaction. The characters know there's a thing that they need to know, but don't know how to progress forward without that information. And the players, probably know the information and are now just sitting around trying to figure out how their characters can figure out the thing that they need to know to continue. Now, option 2, recalling the wrong information, could be kinda funny, but it could also get everyone killed. Or best case scenario, they go and fight the werewolves, realize they have received bad intelligence, then retreat, and are back at the position from option 1, inaction with no clear path forward. Option 3, not remembering the information, but remembering where to look for it, is going to cost time. It is going to put the characters behind schedule, it may ruin their plans, it could cost them financially, but it is still going to eventually give them the information they need to move forward in the adventure. The negative outcome here is not missing the necessary information, but rather the loss of time, which could be mildly inconvenient or terribly inconvenient depending on the specifics of the situation and, how much of a dick you want to be about it. It is an appropriately negative outcome. It provides a setback, but does not halt progress. And just for one final example, let's say that the characters need to find a hermit who lives in the woods because he is the only one who knows the location of the Moonfire Crystal, which is the only thing that can deactivate the barrier around the hideout of the Cult of the Blood God, which the characters need to get into to stop them from using the power of the Blood Moon to resurrect the Blood God, which would be bad. And in order for that to happen, somebody needs to make a survival check to find the hermit in the woods. So the task here is find the hermit, and success means that you find the hermit and he presumably tells you the location of the Moonfire Crystal. However, failure means not finding the hermit who does not tell you the location of the Moonfire Crystal, so you do not get the crystal, do not deactivate the barrier, do not get into the hideout of the Cult of the Blood God, which means that they do resurrect the Blood God with the power of the Blood Moon, and he enacts a 1,000-year reign of blood. So, basically, you fail the check, campaign over. Obviously, I am being as hyperbolic as possible here to make my point, and that point is, you need to consider what the goal is, what success means in relation to that goal, and what failure means in relation to that goal, also without breaking the game. So the goal here is not just navigating the woods and finding the hermit. It is doing so promptly and without incident so that they can move on to the next leg of the adventure. So with that in mind, success means making this just a minor stop on the road to bigger story points. And failure could mean lots of different things. It could mean getting lost for several days, costing precious time and resources. It could mean running into some unexpected hazards, which will also cost precious time and resources, but also be dangerous. Or it could mean that the cult has gotten to the hermit before them and beaten the location of the Moonfire Crystal out of him, and then, with his dying breath, he tells them about a shortcut, but they still have to race to find the crystal before the cult gets it. Success makes things easier, and failure makes them more difficult, but either way, there is always a way to continue moving forward, because, free DM tip here, the progression of a game should never rest upon a single skill check. As in the example, the progression of future events relies on having the crystal and therefore finding the hermit to tell you where the crystal is. And because it is essential to the continuation of the adventure, a failed check should not make obtaining the crystal impossible, just make the path to it longer and/or more dangerous. Because yes, there are and should be consequences for failure, but those consequences should be consequences for the characters, not for the players. And having an entire campaign grind to a halt and being unable to move forward because someone rolled a 3 is a consequence for the players. Notably, a consequence for something that they cannot control. No one roll should ever be able to just derail the game. And that is about all I have to say for this topic, so hopefully I have helped you to think a bit more broadly about skill checks and how you use them, even if that's not what's in the book. Especially if it's not in the book. Because in addition to preventing the whole single point of failure thing, it's also much more interesting to think of a success as making the situation better and a failure as making the situation worse, instead of just thing happens or thing does not happen. Because, with some notable exceptions, there's really not much point in even rolling for something if there are no consequences for failure. And that is about it for this topic, but also, this is kind of a new format video going into more abstract general game concepts instead of specific game review, so if you like this kind of general game theory discussion, make sure that you do hit the like button and leave a comment telling me you like it. It's very important for new format videos because I need to know if people like them, because if they do, I make more, and if they don't, maybe I make more, but maybe I don't. And thank you for watching, with extra special thanks to my Fight and Flail Snails, Samuel Gorski, Ranty Mulholland, and Toshiro Kuro. If you'd like to be cool like them, you can check out my Patreon, where you can get early access to videos and fun stuff that I make for the Patreon. But if you don't want to do that, that's cool too. You can still hit all the lovely buttons, like, subscribe, these other videos which either myself or the cold heartless YouTube algorithm have lovingly selected for you, which I'm sure are lovely videos that you will also enjoy. And I will see you next time.